I'm sure the president will not want him to give evidence, because if Andrew goes, well, why doesn't Donald Trump go as someone else who knows? The letter simply says, we know that you knew him and we'd like you to enlighten us about who else might have been there, about who the contacts were, etc. Well, that could be quite difficult.
We're joined by Baroness Armstrong, Hilary Armstrong, Labour peer and former minister in the Blair government. Good evening to you.
Hello there, Kate.
Thanks for being with us. And the communications consultant Liam Deacon also with us this evening. Hi, Liam.
Good evening.
First up, shall we delve into the dizzying world that is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? Just when he's trying to lie low and busy with a house move, he's been summoned. Well, he's been requested, I think is the more accurate way to put it, to appear before the US Congress about his ties to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Democrats of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee wrote to Andrew requesting that he testify over his connections to Epstein's sex trafficking ring. Earlier, Andrew Lowney, the historian, told us just how far the former prince had fallen.
He's lost everything, and particularly the things that really counted for him. So his position in the royal family, his titles, being a Knight of the Garter, an honorary Vice Admiral. I mean, it's a huge, huge fall. I mean, his family have disowned him. His wife, in effect, has left him. He seems the daughters have also fled abroad. So he's a pretty isolated figure, and one has to feel sorry for him in the circumstances, though he's brought this himself.
That was Andrew Lowney speaking to me earlier. But how much power does Congress have? Exactly what hold does it have over the former Prince Andrew? According to the US reporter Anita Powell we spoke to just in the last half an hour or so, not a whole lot.
Congress, first of all, would need a supermajority of votes to issue a subpoena. But subpoenas, which have more legal muscle to them, only apply to American citizens, which, of course, Mr. Mountbatten Windsor is not.
That is Anita Powell there speaking to us a little bit earlier. Let's go to you, Hilary Armstrong, first of all. Should Prince Andrew, I suppose, embrace the opportunity to once and for all set the record straight?
Oh, goodness gracious me. I'm not sure this would be how he how people would really want him to do it. It is only an invite from Democrats. It will need wider support, I would have thought, across Congress and within the American system for it to have the sort of authority that you would look for. His last attempt at telling us what had happened wasn't exactly successful either, was it?
Is what you refer to.
I'm really not convinced that this would be another way, or would be a way of getting to the facts. There are other people, of course, who also will be fairly clear they don't want him to give evidence. In the American system, I'm sure the president will not want him to give evidence, because if Andrew goes, well, why doesn't Donald Trump go as someone else who knows? The letter simply says, we know that you knew him and we'd like you to enlighten us about who else might have been there, about who the contacts were, etc. Well, that could be quite difficult.
Liam Deacon, we've spoken about the man formerly known as Prince Andrew on the show before. It dominated the show last week, of course, and we called upon your PR expertise to look at what you would do and how you would handle Prince Andrew. Has anything changed there? We've now had a week of this. He's now officially lost all of his titles. There's a story in the paper today about Pitch at Palace. That was his scheme to promote entrepreneurs and British businesses and help them attract investors. And there were potentially links to someone spying for the Chinese government, who denies it, by the way. And it appears that the commercial arm of Pitch at Palace has had its accounts drained in its latest tax return. So that's sort of winding up. There's plenty to chew over here. What would you advise Prince Andrew? What would you advise Andrew Mountbatten Windsor to do?
Gosh, well, I think things have certainly got worse since we last spoke. And for a PR perspective, he's in a situation what we now call a reputation rebuild, where you go away for a period of time and you consider how to re-enter public life if you so wish. I think actually, the more I think about this, I mean, clearly it's the best option for the victims that actually, as the Democrat leading this push to bring him over to the US said, powerful men have escaped justice for far too long. And it's obviously the best option for them if he goes over and gives business and helps expose the other perpetrators. But it actually, I think, if he is innocent, as he says he is going to have to cooperate at some point if he wants to rebuild his relationship. As the Baroness quite rightly said, the last time he confronted these allegations head on in the media and in the public eye, it was an absolute disaster. And I think working with lawyers primarily and working with communications people and actually victims support groups about how he can be compassionate about this, if he reaches a situation where he is ready to be cooperative. One of the things that he wrote in a letter that was revealed earlier this year to Epstein, an email, which revealed he'd been talking to Epstein for longer than he said in the famous interview, was that we're in this together. And he needs to smash that perception. He needs to actually start throwing some of these other awful men under the bus and working hard with victims groups to expose them. And so I do think, look, there's all sorts of barriers. As the Baroness says, just him hopping across the Atlantic and giving evidence is probably impossible at this point. But I do think at some stage, actually, that's what I'd want to see him do, not just as a PR man for his reputation, but just so he can get to the bottom of what happened and what is right. The other interesting, well, I'll let you come in now if you want, but there is a political dimension to this as well that I do think is worth unpicking as well.
Hilary, just expand on that. Liam's thrown the stone out there to you. A political implication to all this. I mean, Andrew is ever since the Newsnight interview, is the master of silence. He won't appear in front of US Congress because he doesn't need to, but also because he gets himself into more trouble when he opens his mouth.
Well, there's a bit of a feeling about that. I do agree, though, that basically victims do need to hear and do need to hear from perpetrators and alleged perpetrators and people involved that they begin to understand the depth of the pain that will live with these victims for the rest of their lives. I work with a number of women who've been abused in the past and have done over the years. And the trauma that they go through and that they live with is huge. And my biggest gripe is that Andrew never seems to acknowledge that there were bad things going on and that actually they affected those women.
Yeah.
Now,
he actually had references to victims taken out of statements, didn't he? That we understand. Certainly, reports saying earlier this week that it was an explicit request. Liam, go on then. Politically,
well, the Baroness is right that. The first thing he needs to change is his tone, because even if he is completely innocent, as he said, he was fraternizing with people who clearly were guilty. And so he needs to change things, because we are in an incredibly febrile moment now where the public are braying for blood, and it's doing constitutional damage to the country. And if he's innocent, then it's incredibly unjust what's happening to him. You may, that may make you wince me saying that. But that is the case. But yeah, the political dimension is interesting because, as with a lot of judicial issues in the US, it's divided down party lines. It was only Democrats that signed this letter. The Republicans accused them of playing politics. But there is a legitimate case that actually there are people in much closer proximity to the US Congress that they could subpoena and bring before a judge, as you've already said, Kate. And I think we'd like to see that happen. And it's a shame that it has become a party political issue in the US. What happens next? I mean, there are going to be potentially court cases. I don't know, very early stages, and it's very careful what you say about these things. But the Met have already said they're looking into the issues about him using security officers to dig up intelligence on them here. So, and the famous photo of Virginia Giuffre and him was taken in London, and she alleges in her book that some of the abuse happened here in London. So crimes have allegedly or potentially happened here in London. So he could face justice here in the UK.
Yeah.
And
we do have obviously different age of consent laws as well, which do play a part. But there are potentially, well, in fact, it's been widely reported, there are other victims who may feel that they want to speak and maybe, lodging and sort of gathering their evidence as we speak. So any hope of him remaining quiet for the years to come and just enjoying sort of a lonely retirement on the Sandringham estate is for the birds, isn't it?
Yes, and I mean, look, he's never going to re-enter public life in any meaningful sense. But so the best case scenario for him, if he faces some kind of investigation and actually potentially goes to court and is not proven guilty, but then if he goes into a period of reflection and makes some powerful statements and actually goes away, learns something and says something quite meaningful about what he's learned and how he can then offer up the information and help victims and help bring other people to justice, it's not unforeseeable. There is a path to redemption where people might actually sit back and say, here was a man who mixed with lots of wrong people, did lots of wrong things, but learned something and then used the knowledge that he did have then to actually help victims and made a few statements. And that is the only sort of path to some kind of mild redemption that I can imagine.
Sky News has just been speaking to the Democrat Congressman Suhas Subramaniam. This is him speaking.
Well, I want to know what he knew about the entire criminal enterprise. It seemed like he'd been to the island. It seemed like he'd been very engaged and friendly with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. And so he must have known a lot about their business dealings. He must have known a lot about the victims and who was victimized, as well as the other perpetrators of the crimes. And I would ask him about his involvement as well.
There we go. So that's just the latest, really. Knowing what we know, saying what's been said, the Democrat Congressman Suhas Subramaniam. There we go. Rich and powerful men have evaded justice for far too long, said Robert Garcia, the top Democrat on that committee that's written a letter to Andrew requesting his presence before Congress.